We live in interesting times. Today's stories. Liberians hail victory of ex-football star Way in landmark vote. Fierce fighting kills dozens in northwest Syria. Worst New York fire in decades kills 12, including 4 children. Arctic cold grips Canada. Following Trump, Guatemala to move embassy to Jerusalem. Boeing and Embraer to confirm merger talks are ongoing, but a deal is not guaranteed. Plus, Canadian National Exhibition. This is Eagle News Canada, bringing you stories from around the globe. I am Archie Rose Natividad. Liberians hail victory of ex-football star Way in landmark vote.
Liberians feted former football star George Weah's presidential victory in the country's first democratic transfer of power in 7 decades, scarred by civil wars, political assassinations, and an Ebola crisis.
The CDC, 732,185 votes, representing 61.5%. The Unity Party, 457,579, representing 38.5%. Total valid votes, 1,189,764. Total invalid, 28,360, bringing the total votes to 1,218,124.
Weah, idolized in Liberia as Mr. George, is set to replace Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who took over in 2006 at the helm of the West African state founded by freed U.S. slaves. He will be sworn in on January 22.
Based on the result just read, I, acting on behalf of the Board of Commissioners, do hereby declare the presidential ticket of Senator George Manning Weah and Joy Howard Taylor as the winner from the December 26, 2017 presidential runoff.
The 51-year-old starred at top-flight European clubs Paris Saint-Germain and AC Milan in the 1990s before briefly playing for Chelsea and Manchester City toward the end of his career. Weah, who entered politics after retiring from football in 2002, easily beat Vice President Joseph Boakai in Thursday's runoff vote, gaining 61.5% of the ballot against 38.5% for his rival. Weah won in 14 of Liberia's 15 counties. Boakai conceded defeat on Friday and said he had called Weah to congratulate him. The tumultuous events of the past 70 years in Liberia, where an estimated 250,000 people died during back-to-back civil wars between 1989 to 2003, have prevented a democratic handover from taking place since 1944. Sirleaf's predecessor, Charles Taylor, fled the country in 2003, hoping to avoid prosecution for funding rebel groups in neighboring Sierra Leone. 2 presidents who served prior to Taylor were assassinated. The UN and regional bloc ECOWAS hailed the peaceful nature of the vote, with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres praising the government, political parties, and the people of Liberia for the orderly poll, which the EU said generally respected constitutional rules. The Sirleaf administration, elected in 2005, guided the nation out of the ruins of war and through the horrors of the 2014 to 2016 Ebola crisis, but is accused of failing to combat poverty and corruption. Weah, the only African ever to have won both FIFA's World Player of the Year and the coveted Ballon d'Or, missed out on the presidency in a 2005 bid. Natalie Fitzpatrick, Eagle News, 1 with 25.
Fierce fighting kills dozens in northwest Syria. Ansel Morano reports.
Intense fighting killed dozens of people on the edge of the last Syrian province entirely outside government control as aid workers completed a series of medical evacuations from another rebel-held area. Government and allied forces backed by Russian warplanes took on mostly jihadist fighters in an area straddling the border between Idlib and Hama provinces. The fighting, which could signal the start of a major offensive to wrest Idlib province from rebels dominated by a former al-Qaeda affiliate, escalated on Thursday. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, at least 68 people have been killed since then, and the clashes, centered around an area called Al Tamana, continued on Friday. At least 21 civilians were among the dead, said Rami Abdel Rahman, who heads the Britain-based monitoring organization. They were killed in airstrikes carried out by Russian warplanes and by barrel bombs dropped by Syrian aircraft, he said. He said 27 soldiers and members of allied paramilitary units were killed in the fighting, as well as 20 rebels from Islamist groups or from former al-Qaeda affiliate Fateh al-Sham. Abdul Rahman said the latest deaths brought the number of civilians killed in the area since Monday to 42, and the death toll among combatants to 90. The intensifying fighting in the area appeared to signal the start of a government offensive in Idlib province. Ann Salmerano, Eagle News, 1/25.
Thanks, Ann. Worst New York fire in decades kills 12, including 4 children. Alyssa De Jesus reports.
4 children were among 12 people killed in a devastating fire that tore through a New York apartment building as terrified residents rushed to escape. Authorities said the cause of the blaze, the city's deadliest in decades, was under investigation. The fire broke out around 6:51 p.m. Thursday in a 25-apartment building near the Bronx Zoo, one of the most popular tourist attractions in the U.S. financial capital. Fueled by strong gusts of frigid wind, the flames quickly raced through the building. More than 160 firefighters rushed to the scene and took some 3 hours to control the blaze, local media reported. In the bitter cold, water leaking from the hoses froze on the pavement. Police said Friday 3 girls aged 1, 2, and 7 and an unidentified boy were among the dead. A 19-year-old woman was also killed. Tearful residents said they heard cries of fire in the building, followed by a mad rush to exit the smoke-filled building. Many fled into the frigid night with just the clothes on their backs. The cause of the fire has yet to be determined. The plaster and brick structure, built in 1916, was not fireproof and had 6 open violations, including for a defective smoke detector, New York Times reported. Mayor Bill de Blasio called it an unspeakable tragedy in the middle of the holiday season, as the city of 8.5 million straddles Christmas and New Year festivities.
About half an hour after the ambulance, the fire department came. We saw them take out her husband, put him outside, burn all over, burn, burn, burn. Then they start bringing them out one by one. It's hard to take. It's really, really hard to take.
Alyssa De Jesus, Eagle News, 1/25.
Up next, Arctic cold grips Canada. Following Trump, Guatemala will move its embassy to Jerusalem. Boeing and Embraer confirmed their merger talks are ongoing, but a deal is not guaranteed. Eagle News Canada will return in a moment. Welcome back. You are watching Eagle News Canada. In Canada, extreme cold warnings were issued for scores of communities across the country, including the heavily populated provinces of Ontario and Quebec. Michael Gruzo reports.
Toronto reported temperatures of minus 15 Celsius, 5 Fahrenheit, and Ottawa minus 25 Celsius. The coldest spot in Canada was minus 42.8 Celsius in Armstrong, Ontario. Extreme cold warnings are issued when very cold temperatures or wind chill creates an elevated risk to health, such as frostbite and hypothermia. Meteorologist Alexander Perron with Environment Canada said the temperatures were 10 to 20 degrees below what is normal for the season. The deep cold is forecast to remain until early January. High winds of up to 120 kilometers 76 miles per hour, linked to the low temperatures, have left almost 160,000 homes in the eastern province of Nova Scotia, almost one-third of the power company's customers without electricity. Residents shared stunning photos of the whiteout on social media, with meteorologists attributing the 58 inches, 147 centimeters of snow that fell over Christmas Day, Monday to Tuesday evening, to icy winds blowing over the adjoining Lake Erie, one of North America's Great Lakes.
We haven't had a winter like this since we were little kids, and it just feels good to be playing out here again. We haven't even got to our backyard yet. You should see it back there.
It's untouched.
Michael Grizzo, Eagle News, 1 with 25.
Thank you, Michael. Guatemala said Monday it is starting the process of moving its embassy in Israel to Jerusalem after President Jimmy Morales announced he would follow U.S. President Donald Trump's controversial lead on the Holy City. Tiffany Alasasis reports.
Morales wrote a message to Guatemalans on his Facebook page Sunday, saying he had spoken with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and that one of the most important topics was the return of Guatemala's embassy to Jerusalem. On Monday, the Foreign Ministry said it was implementing the order. Guatemala's leader made the embassy announcement on Christmas Eve, 3 days after two-thirds of the UN member states rejected Trump's decision to have the United States recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Netanyahu on Monday hailed the decision, saying Guatemala would not be the only nation to follow Washington's lead. Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister Tzipi Hotovely told public radio that we are in contact with at least 10 countries, some of them in Europe, over the possible transfer of their embassies to Jerusalem. But the Palestinian Foreign Ministry slammed Guatemala. Guatemala's decision also drew fire from Bolivian President Evo Morales. In all, 128 nations voted to maintain the international consensus that Jerusalem's status can only be decided through peace negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. Only 8 countries stood with the United Nations in voting against the resolution in the UN General Assembly. Among the Guatemalas and the fellow Central American countries, Honduras. Guatemala and Honduras are both reliant on U.S. funding to improve security in their gang-ridden territories. Violence, corruption, and poverty have made the two countries, along with El Salvador, the main source of illegal migration to the United States, which is giving them $750 million to provide better conditions at home. Tiffany Alisasis, Eagle News, 1 with 25.
Thanks, Tiffany. U.S. aerospace giant Boeing and Brazil's Embraer said Thursday they were in talks on a potential combination, but cautioned there was no guarantee of a deal. Lynn Espiritu reports.
Boeing and Brazil's Embraer talks ignited shares of the Brazilian company, which makes commercial, military, and executive jets despite immediate signs of opposition to the transaction in Brazil. Any deal would need to be approved by the Brazilian government. A merger between the two companies would build on their existing alliance on the KC-39 military plane and would permit the much bigger Boeing to fill a gap in its fleet with regional single-aisle planes. A transaction would also rebut an alliance between Boeing, art rival Airbus, and Canada's Bombardier to build smaller planes. The Wall Street Journal first reported the Boeing-Embraer talks earlier Thursday, citing unnamed sources. The report said the parties discussed a deal that would see Boeing pay a relatively large premium for Embraer, but the talks are on hold as the two sides await word on the Brazilian government's view of the deal. U.S. traded shares of Embraer shot up following the report, finishing at $24.42, up 22.1%. But Boeing fell 1.0% to $295.03. However, the Folha de Sao Paulo newspaper reported that Brazil President Michel Temer already ruled out a takeover of the Embraer, one of Brazil's flagship companies. Brazilian officials were reported to have been taken by surprise by the Wall Street Journal story on the merger talks. Embraer was formed by the Brazilian government in 1969 and privatized in 1994 in a process that granted the Brasilia golden shares with some veto rights. The union at Embraer's São José do Campos plant also immediately opposed the deal, saying it would risk the job of the 16,000 workers employed in Brazil. Embraer in 2016 notched $6.2 billion in revenues, while Boeing had $94.6 billion. The merger talks come 2 months after Airbus signed an agreement to take a majority stake in production a narrow-body plane made by Bombardier. Those planes are in the center of an ongoing U.S. trade dispute with Canada, sparked by a Boeing complaint against Bombardier. Lynn Espiritu, Eagle News, 1 with 25.
Canadian National Exhibition. That's next. Eagle News Canada will return shortly. This is Eagle News Canada. I am Archie Rose, the TV Dad. Kathleen Cruz for entertainment this week. Kathleen?
The latest Star Wars movie is the second highest opening ever in North America. Star Wars fans, the latest episode of blockbuster space saga has raked in more than $450 million worldwide since hitting theaters, a major success for the most hyped movie of the year. A Disney spokesman said the film, directed by Rian Johnson, which features the late Carrie Fisher's final performance as Princess Leia, took in $220 million in North America and another $230.8 million overseas. The company said it is the fifth biggest global box office debut in history. It is also the second biggest opening in U.S. history, and in December, only behind Star Wars The Force Awakens, the opener of the saga sequel trilogy that took $248 million on its debut weekend. The Last Jedi sees the return of the characters introduced in The Force Awakens, with Rey portrayed by Daisy Ridley looking to Luke Skywalker by Mark Hamill to teach her about the Force. One of the film's key draws for fans is to find out the fate of Leia. Fisher died in December 2016 at the age of 60, shortly after wrapping up filming her scenes. In November, Disney, which acquired Lucasfilm 5 years ago, announced plans for a new Star Wars trilogy, the fourth, as well as a live-action television series. Disney chief executive Robert Iger said at the time, "We have big ambitions for the Star Wars franchise." Johnson, who directed The Last Jedi, will develop the new films. Star Wars, the brainchild of George Lucas, has grown into the most lucrative and influential movie franchise of all time since the original film was released in 1977. That is all for entertainment news. I am Kathleen Cruz for Eagle News Canada, and I am 1 with 25.
Thanks, Kathleen. EBC's Ashley Sagmar takes us to the Canadian National Exhibition. Ashley?
The Canadian National Exhibition is the largest annual fair in Canada and the fifth in North America. Come with me to find out why this exhibit attracts approximately 1.5 million visitors each year.
The Canadian National Exhibition, better known as the CNE or the X, is Canada's largest community event and one of the top 5 agricultural fairs in North America. CNE has a long and vibrant history and was founded in 1879 when it was first known as the Toronto Industrial Exhibition. When the fair made its debut, the fairgrounds covered almost 350 acres and included one of the finest amusement parks and permanent exhibition facilities in the world. Today, people come to experience and witness the latest innovations in technology and commercial products at the X, and some attendees come to enjoy popular entertainers as well as to participate in a collective community celebration. The fair takes place at the end of the summer over 18 days, leading up to and including Labor Day for people to celebrate and close off the summer. The CNE attracts more than 1.5 million visitors every year, making it the largest fair in Canada. This year, the CNE celebrates its 139th year in operation at the Exhibition Place in downtown Toronto. Highlights of the annual CNE include entertainment, concerts, the farm, shopping, rides, games, Kids World, exhibits, park entertainers and interactive experiences, and of course, food. The best part is that all attractions and shows are included with the admission fee to the CNE.
Reporting from CNE in Toronto, Canada, my name is Ashley Sakmar and I am 1 with 25.
Thank you, Ashley. That is this week's Eagle News Canada. Join us again next week as we bring stories that matter to you. Visit our website at Eaglenews.PH. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/EagleNewsPH. Thank you for watching and have a happy new year. I am Archie Rose at TV Dad. I am 1 with 25.